If you had 48 hours to make a game with the theme of bubble, what would you make? Perhaps a game where you pop as many bubbles as possible. A game where you blow bubbles to save things. A game where you ride through the ocean on a bubble. Or a game where you make bubble tea. Well, that was the challenge for the 2025 Global Game Jam. The game I created was Deep Diver, an endless arcade game where you swim along collecting as many coins as possible before your oxygen supply runs out. There are bubbles for you to get more oxygen, but be careful because there are also many obstacles from seaweed, fishing hooks, jellyfish and shark that will drain big chunks of your oxygen. This is a very fun game to play. I've had my friends compete for high scores and my girlfriend loves to play it when she's got a spare minute. I'll leave a link for you to play in the video description, but for now, this is the story about how it was made. On Friday evening, the theme for the jam was announced as Bubble. I immediately wrote down as many related concepts as I could. I then tried to come up with game ideas from that. This was hard, not for a lack of ideas, but for a struggle to connect with any of them. This led me to playing some mobile games for inspiration. This included the game I used to play called Jetpack Joyride, an endless running game. Playing this drew me to the idea of an endless arcade game, despite the fact it felt like the least relevant to the theme. To make it more relevant, I came up with the idea of an oxygen mechanic. You have an oxygen bar that depletes when you move, and you can collect bubbles to fill it back. But if it goes to zero, then it's game over. With this idea in mind, I began drawing concept art to get an idea of what the game would look like. I chose an underwater theme so that the oxygen mechanic made sense. This meant the player character had to be swimming. I then added jellyfish, sharks, fishing hooks and seaweed as obstacles. I finally added coins, bubbles and a treasure chest to reward the player. I was really pleased with how this all came together. It reminded me of an underwater scene I had drawn in the last Pixelmania challenge, and I was excited about bringing that to life. Unfortunately, I didn't have much more time to work on it, so to end the day I created a task list with all the features I wanted the game to have. On Saturday I got straight to work, starting with player movement. The player moves up, down, left and right, and gravity slowly pulls them down. I then added obstacles. Fishing hooks spawn at the top of the water, sharks and jellyfish are in the middle, and seaweed is at the bottom, with sharks also moving forward, hunting you down. With these in place, I was able to start work on the oxygen mechanic. The oxygen bar is shown at the bottom of the screen. Oxygen drains at a constant rate, with movement and obstacle collision draining it further. To restore oxygen, I added bubbles. I also added coins at this point to give the player a score. When you run out of oxygen, the player dies and the game over screen is shown. This displays your score and lets you replay the game. These features gave the game a solid foundation, but to turn this into an endless game, it needed one more feature: level generation. To make an interesting level, the player needs plenty of coins to collect, obstacles to avoid, and bubbles to keep playing. I initially did this at random, choosing either a coin, bubble, or obstacle to spawn. However, with 4 obstacles, that meant a lot more of them were spawned. To fix this, I split the spawn logic into good and bad objects and made them spawn in groups. This made finding coins great because there were so many to collect, and this made obstacles a real challenge because there were a lot to avoid. At this point, things were looking good and the day was coming to a close. I asked my girlfriend to test the game to see how it plays and if there are any major problems with it. She's not a gamer, so it's really valuable to see how she interacts with the game. She played the game for about 15 minutes straight, which is far longer than any other game I've given her. This was really a good sign that the game was fun, although there were some clear problems. First, oxygen drained much quicker than I had anticipated. And second, bubbles didn't spawn enough. This effectively made each playthrough quite short. To fix this, I made oxygen drain at a much slower rate, especially when you move, because before it felt like you were being punished simply for playing the game. As for the bubble spawn mechanic, I changed the level generation system to be much more lenient. Always choosing bubbles as the good option when you're below 50% oxygen, and only spawning bubbles if you're below 15%. These changes made the game feel much better to play, so I ended the day building and uploading the first version of the game to the Global Game Jam website. Sunday was all about getting the game to the finish line. Whilst it was good to play, it had a clear lack of polish. My first task for the day was to create animations for everything I could. I started with the player, creating both standing and swimming animations. I then added a swimming animation to the shark and a swaying animation for the seaweed. Despite these new animations, the game still felt static. To fix this, I wrote a script to make game objects bob up and down. I applied this to everything else in the game to make them look like they were floating in water. And this really improved the overall look and feeling of the game. I then moved on to sound. I went to opengameart.org for some music, which has been playing in the background, and I also found some sound effects for the player. These play when you collect coins and bubbles, when you hit obstacles, and when you die. The final steps I took were to add some small features, like bubbles coming from the player and on-screen mobile controls. On-screen controls are fantastic to include with any Godot web build because they make the game compatible for any device. In the past I've used regular buttons to do this, however they didn't suit this game because you can only press them one at a time. Luckily Godot has an easy way to change this. Instead of using a textured button, I used a touchscreen button, which works almost exactly the same but allows for multiple touches. The only caveat to this is you need to turn on Emulate Touch from Mouse in the project settings for it to work on PC. Finally, I built and uploaded the final version of the game to both the Global Game Jam website and the itch web page, making sure the pages match the game with decorations and screenshots. Like I mentioned at the start of this devlog, I think the game is really fun, and I thoroughly enjoyed making it. It's simple, yet effective. I'm aware of a few bugs, and I was a little sad I didn't get everything from the concept art like the treasure chest or the god rays, however you barely notice them when you're playing. Again, there is a link to the game in the video description for you to try it out. I hope you've enjoyed watching this devlog for my 2025 Global Game Jam game, Deep Diver. Subscribe for more great game development content like this devlog series for my museum management game. Thanks for watching and goodbye.